We haven't done anything new yet. Everything was already done. Everything has already been done. We're just rediscovering what we lost. We are actually aliens here. We don't even belong in this galaxy. This, proto-cuneiform. This is a proto-cuneiform metric system dating back prior to Mesopotamia. And this was found actually in Mesoamerica. So what in the world is proto-cuneiform metric system being discovered in the Americas when we know that Sumeria is supposed to be the cradle of civilization all the way in Mesopotamia coming out of Iraq? Pretty interesting. It is the same geographic location as the Grand Gallery. You can debunk the debunkers with the fact that we already had the metric system, and it's actually well known. It's just that nobody has found it. But I found it years ago, and I talk about it a lot. So what is the power here? Let's talk about more circumstantial evidence that these beings came here with advanced knowledge. I looked into the mathematics in the Great Pyramid, and I found a lot of incredible correlations, okay? You can calculate a lot of things based on the structure itself. So what Thoth did, he took this pyramid and he said, I want for the future, I want this to be a time capsule of knowledge. And what I want to do is I want to take all this information, the information about all this stuff, and I want to compile it into the actual building structure itself, so that in a future time, which is now, mankind can decipher it and realize how incredibly we were, and that this came from advanced knowledge. The mean distance to the sun. In Kemet, he was known as Amen-Ra. And this is why people say Amen, actually, to him. He actually made it a rule, a law. But he had these brick masons helping him rebuild the land of Kem. And these brick masons had the secret knowledge of space flight, technologies, how to turn stone structures into advanced computer housing, data storage devices, as well as power generators and many other. A lot of the stone structures that were built were actually multifunctional stone computers. If you're going to a place when you only have limited resources, that you can't take a factory and a whole bunch of workers with you, what do? You learn how to work with what's there. And they mastered stone masonry, but they also encoded and embedded a lot of the wisdom and knowledge from the ancient Egyptian mysteries and the Kemetic mysteries into the structures. Now, these Freemasons were called Shattu. As a matter of fact, the Shattu helped Amen-Ra escape. In the last, there was a pyramid war. There were two pyramids. The second pyramid war in the tablets talks about the fact that the Shattu helped Amen-Ra escape through a hidden passage in one of the pyramids. And before he left, he decreed that he would leave the kingdom to his Ra-Kam. Ra-Kam, K-A-M, translates now into shield. Kam translates into shield, Ra, shield. Over time, it became Rothschilds. And so this decree came down tens of thousands of years ago. Who's the richest family on the planet, worth $700 trillion combined income, net worth? The Rothschilds. It's happening till this very day. And this masonry is part of the mysteries, in the mystery schools. Only adept initiates, hand-picked people would get to learn this sacred knowledge. And then the Masons would actually encode it into structures and buildings, which is encoded all throughout the world, throughout Rome at the Vatican, all throughout Europe, all throughout like areas like in Bosnia, believe it or not, where you have the Pyramid of the Sun there in the Bosnian Valley.
How would they pick who gets the knowledge?
They literally had a system in which they can identify people who they called adept initiates, people who seem to have some type of, to perceive things at a higher level or retain knowledge at a higher level or display some type of talent or ability. And those people were literally handpicked. Yeshua, aka Jesus, was one of these students as well. If you read the Gospel of the Holy 12, you'll find that when he disappeared from the Bible, where did he go? He went to Egypt. I've taken many people to the actual bed that he slept in, which is still there in Egypt. It's a shrine now. And he was there learning the Egyptian mysteries. And this is well known, well documented. That was an apocryphal text that was left out of the Bible. He left there and went to Tibet to learn Reiki healing and Qigong and energy healing with his hands. He came down through India, learned the mystic arts, and then the Bible picks up at the age of 32, I called my son out of Egypt. That's what the Bible says. And he ends up riding it on the back of a donkey back in Jerusalem. So that's the loop that's missing out of there, 12 to 32. That chunk is missing out in the Gospel of the Holy 12. Again, he also had the Mason knowledge. Now, the thing about knowledge is it can be used for good or it could be used for evil. Knowledge is just knowledge. If you have and I have a car, and you're trained on how to use a gun appropriately, which you are, right? Mm-hmm. You know how to use it, when to use it, because your mind is clear. You're not going to use it on anybody just because you want to. You're actually trained to hit enemy targets or to save civilians, right? Don't shoot civilians. I have a car. I have no training. I'm using ignorant knowledge, and I'm just angry. I can take my car and I can people just by driving my car right down the sidewalk. I can wipe out a ton of people, and you could be walking on that same sidewalk with it, and you nobody. But you have the knowledge, and I don't. So just a little bit of a metaphor there. Mm-hmm. It's nothing to do with the knowledge. It has to do with how it's applied. And so a lot of people have taken ancient wisdom and ancient knowledge when they discovered how powerful it was and how it could control masses of people and allow you to supersede them economically and everything else. And they decided to use it for darkness, for negativity, for power-hungry type struggles and so forth. And so we have a situation where, unfortunately, a lot of these secret societies, Skull and Crossbones and Illuminati and all these things that exist, they all stem from ancient mystery schools and then developed into these subordinate dark entities that are now running the planet with Thoth from the Emerald Tablets, he calls them the Dark Brothers. An energy grid is where the magnetic field of the Earth whips out of the planet. So a lot of these structures are literally sitting directly on top of these high energy magnetic fields.
Really?
So if you go and get from usgs.gov and take the Earth's magnetic field map and then lay it over a map of a lot of these megalithic structures, all of a sudden you go, oh my God, they're all sitting on top of like high energy magnetic portals, basically. And what's interesting about that is how in the world did they figure this out? What type of tool do you use to measure how much magnetism is whipping out of the Earth here from the core or 100 miles away? How do you distinguish which one is the spot to put it in? They had to have had some level of advanced technology that had the capability. Now we do it through satellite technology. So how in the world were they able to do it? We have a satellite that orbits the planet in a polar orbit. It orbits this way, not this way. And as the Earth spins on its axis, it's taking swaths of data. Magnetism, electromagnetic fields, it's taking topographical data and so forth and so on, minerals and so forth. We know everything that's on Earth from a polar orbiting satellite, which is why I believe that's exactly what was used. Because if you look at the Great Pyramid at Giza, where is it located? Directly at the center of land mass on Earth, not the center of the Earth, the center of land mass. There's only one way to get that calculation. You have to have a satellite orbiting in a polar orbit, scanning the planet as it spins on its axis to pick up all the topographical data, to be able to calculate the land mass and to find the center of the mass of land. And not only that, of course, it has one of the biggest magnetic fields coming right out of that spot too. Boom, center, they drop it right there. And then also the Great Pyramid, the height of it matches the average height of all the peaks on Earth. Again, how can you do that? The mud ramp theory it took over for a little while, but then some real good physicists said, I don't know, they did some calculations, you would need more mass than the pyramid in mud to be able to create the mud ramps to put it didn't add up.
Yeah.
So the mud ramp and then the lack of trees and lack of timber and so forth to rolling these 15-ton stones in some cases on top of, come on, it just sounds crazy.
Yeah.
And when you go to the Serapeum at Saqqara, which is Enki's Halls of Amenti, it's these underground halls that are there that I take people to every year that has this incredible hallway carved out of solid stone underground. And these alcoves are in there. And inside of each alcove, perfectly fitted, tight and snug, are these 60 and 70-ton, what look like sarcophagus.
What's sarcophagus?
What they claim they will put the body in, but they're not sarcophagus because there's no them. They're clean. They're actually, you can eat off the floor inside of those things. I've stood inside of them. They're higher than my head, and I'm 6'4". The lids weigh like 40 tons. But if you read the Emerald Tablets, you discover those were the halls of Amenti, where these beings claimed to have rejuvenation chambers, and they would put bodies in them. And they would literally have some type of technology that would transfer their consciousness into a new body when the other one wore out. And they would put the wore out body in these things and let them rejuvenate over time. Sounds crazy, but now modern science is doing the same exact thing. They literally are right now doing the same exact thing, learning how to transfer human consciousness from one body to another. They've even created mind links where they can transfer an active awake person's mind into a person that is already awake and conscious.
Wait a minute. Who's doing this?
Scientists in the Brain Institute and other laboratories all around the world. They have an experiment, and I'll get you the exact experiment that it was, where they have one gentleman in a room with a blindfold on and his hand on a remote control, a video game in front of him, but he can't see the video game. They have another gentleman in another room who's looking at the video game with no remote control. They create a mind link between the two and transfer this guy's mind into the other guy. He's now controlling the other guy's hands to play the video game. One master architect. If you look at the Emerald Tablets, got to go back to the oldest text that we know of, 38,000-year-old text. Thoth claims to have built the Great Pyramid. He said, build I the Great Pyramid, patterned after Earth's force, so that it too might remain through the ages, and it sure has. So the Great Pyramid is not 4,000 or 5,000 years old. That Great Pyramid is about 38,000 years old. And so is the Sphinx. His father told him to build the Sphinx and put his face on it. And then later on, that face was recarved. This is why the face is not the right size for the body to his nephew's face. But the face was never the face of a lion. But this guy was the master architect. He laid down the blueprint for how to do this. In the Emerald Tablets, he takes a crew with him on the great ship that descends on the land of Chem, rebuilds the land of Chem. He says something very interesting in this text. After spending many years there, they don't specify exactly how many, but they say many years, rebuilding the land of Chem, he tells that crew, that team that came with that original team, to spread out around the world and duplicate what we did here. Then all of a sudden, what happens? Pyramids pop up all around the world, megalithic structures, megalithic temples all around the world, all using the same exact building technique. Thoth himself even leaves Africa, takes Olmecs with him, and leaves his brother Amun-Ra in charge, and he goes to Mesoamerica and builds a Teotihuacan civilization and builds that whole Teotihuacan pyramid complex, which, by the way, is aligned with Orion, the same exact formation as the ones in Africa, at Egypt, right, at Giza. And also what? Built on top of an aquifer. The base of the Pyramid of the Sun is exactly the same size as the base of the pyramid, Great Pyramid at Giza. And the height is exactly 50% the height down to the millimeter of the Great Pyramid at Giza. Again,
down to the millimeter?
Down to the millimeter. And this is, again, what? One master architect, again, showcasing his talents and going all around the world. This guy is known everywhere I've gone on the planet. I went to Africa. He's obviously all throughout Africa. He's known as Tehuti, Jehuti, Thoth, right? According to the ancient Egyptians, he ruled for 16,000 years, one person. In China, he's Wang Di, the first emperor of China, who came down on a fiery dragon. Sounds like a flying ship. Ruled over to China for decades, for several centuries, and then just got on this flying dragon and disappeared again. In Mexico, he's known as Quetzalcoatl, Lord Bacal, Kukulkan. He comes in on again a what? According to the Mayans, a fiery dragon, and he's there. What he built? Teotihuacan, Cobol, all these places were developed. The Mayans didn't build anything. They inherited what was already there. The Aztecs didn't build anything. It was already there. And that's even in their own records. Matter of fact, they didn't even know who the people were originally that built some of this stuff, so they gave them the name Teotihuacans. But in the Emerald Tablets, it tells you exactly who it was. And I was out in Australia, in the outback, in the middle of nowhere. A gigantic petroglyph of who? Thoth, out of Kemet, in Australia, carved into rock in the ground, and he's on a ship flying through the Milky Way galaxy. That's what it is, a giant disc, and he's sitting on this thing, and they said that's him flying through the Milky Way galaxy.
Wow.
And so the more you look into it, these structures, they were built by people, not aliens. In other words, Thoth, in my opinion, wasn't from this planet, and also his relatives, but they had the people doing the labor. They taught the construction techniques, and they had the blueprints on how to do this. They weren't going to get out there themselves and do all this hard labor, but they had the blueprints. They laid out the foundation, and they said, hey, this is how we do this, and we're going to do this all around the entire planet. He's sitting on this box, has a symbol for magnetism on it, okay, and this ancient Sumerian tablet. And then, so he's sitting here with this box. There's this tripod thing up in the air, and it's got this disc. Underneath the disc is a gigantic stone table, and as human beings, you can tell they're human because their height compared to this guy, they're tiny, and a human is picking it up with one hand. That disc is a cymatic frequency. You can perfectly match. I found the exact frequency, and I have a video on that frequency, which creates that exact same cymatic pattern. And so that cymatic pattern and magnetism in some way reduce the weight of that gigantic stone table, allowing an average normal human being to pick it up with one hand. I'm going to send you this image. Pretty interesting stuff. So when you now say, how do they do all this? Cymatic frequencies and magnetism, electromagnetism and cymatic frequencies, in some way together, they combine those two things to reduce the weight. They didn't make them completely weightless, but they significantly reduced the weight of a lot of the stones. The second thing is, Thoth gives away something else in the emerald tablets. He utilizes cymatic frequencies and photons to manifest solid matter. Now that sounds crazy in ancient tablets, but guess what happened 2 years ago? In a laboratory, in the world we live in right now, scientists got together and they combined cymatic frequencies and photons, and for the first time ever created solid matter.
Wow.
So
where did that happen?
That happened, I believe it was in the UK.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'll give you the link to all this stuff. So pretty interesting. So the tablets keep getting proven by modern science. This is why I keep going back to the tablets, because wait a minute. This guy says this then. You've heard of the active denial system in the military. It's this dish that sends out a beam of frequency towards people that are looking to do harm, right? Mobs. And it'll make you stop in your tracks. It'll make you feel like it'll make you feel like you're on fire. It can even put voices in your head. It's called the active denial system in the military. In the Emerald Tablets, Thoth has this group of people coming at him because they don't know who he is when he lands his ship. He says, I raised my staff and sent out a ray of vibration which stopped them still in their tracks. Sounds like the active denial system to me. Same technology, just a different year. I keep putting these things in my book to show the commonalities between the two, because what we're doing now, we're just simply rediscovering everything that already existed. Yeah. We haven't done anything new yet. Everything was already done. Everything has already been done. We're just rediscovering what we lost. Listen, even the Grand Gallery, the location of the Grand Gallery inside the Great Pyramid, when you look at the longitude, it's the same exact digits as the speed of light in meters per second. How is this possible? I started asking the same question, and I said, wait, I gotta find some kind of link to this, and I found it. Guess what they found in Mexico decades ago? They found Proto-Sumerian cuneiform tablets and pottery and everything else. What is proto, meaning pre-Sumerian, stuff doing in the Americas? But not only did they find that, this is even on Wikipedia, it was a metric system. It was their metric system. So the metric system is thousands and tens of thousands of years old. Forget thousands, tens of thousands of years old. We only rediscovered what already existed, or probably the guy, I forget his name now, the Frenchman who came up with it, probably found these tablets or the existence of these tablets and said, oh, I can make this whole metric system out of this. It already existed. The metric system is ancient. We only rediscovered what it was recently. That's all. That's the only thing I can give you.
How about the golden ratio?
Yeah.
What is the golden ratio?
The golden ratio is a specific numeric equation that gives you 3.17. It gives you the Fibonacci spiral. It also gives you the golden rectangle and the golden triangle, which no matter which way you look at them, you can always get the perfect spiral to fit inside. And that spiral, for whatever reason, because that spiral is in everything that's in life, it's very beautiful to us. The most magnificent structures were always set on the Fibonacci spiral or pi, right? And so even the Great Pyramid is built on pi. All these magnificent structures were built on pi because for some reason it taps into our inner consciousness, our inner being. Our fingers, if you take your fingers and look at the space between your digits, you'll get pi. And you can get the Fibonacci's code based on the space in the digits of your own hand. The distance from your eyes to your nose, the distance from your top of in between your eyebrows to the tip of your nose, all this is all the same thing over. And you just keep the distance from your elbow to your wrist, the distance from the wrist to the tip of your middle finger, it's all pi.
Are you kidding me? What do you mean
the whole human body is designed on that number.
You mean it's what do you mean it's pi?
You can get if you calculate the distance in the space in between your digits and your elbows and your joints and everything else, I'll send you a diagram on this as well. You'll get the Fibonacci sequence built into the human avatar body itself. It's in everything.
I don't understand how it could be pi, because if it's pi is what, 3.14? repeating forever.
When you calculate, the pi creates the Fibonacci spiral, or allows you to place the Fibonacci spiral inside of anything, all right? And so when you start creating these calculations and you start doing the measurements of these distances, you start finding out that they fit perfectly with that number, and that you can get the Fibonacci sequence is built into the human avatar body. And I'll give you a complete diagram so you can see how it all breaks down. CERN is the LHC, the Large Hadron Collider. It's the largest machine in the world, located in Switzerland, and it's all underground, and it uses this gigantic track with this underground tube that's connected, and they send atoms in opposite directions and speed them up to a percentage of the speed of light and then let them collide. And then they analyze the collision to see what comes out of this collision between atoms, quarks and muons and everything else that they discover. But something else they discover in the process is that they create microscopic black holes. Now,
really?
Yeah. So originally, a lot of people were getting scared about this because they were like, man, if you guys create a black hole here on Earth, will it suck the Earth in? Fair to assume black holes are supposed to be pretty things, even light can't escape them. So why create one here on Earth? But I think, in my opinion, again, this is nothing that I've read, but my hypothesis is that part of the work going on at CERN is to learn how to create stable wormholes. What Einstein and Rosen called an Einstein-Rosen bridge, where you take space and you fold it and make a hole, punch a hole in between to make a connection, a shortcut through space-time. And one thing I want to clear up first, Anunnaki and Atlanteans are really, in my opinion, the same exact people. And that's Billy Carson's opinion. I'm not saying that's a stated fact anywhere. And so sometimes if something's my opinion, I'll let you know. If something's been recorded in ancient tablets or texts or science information that's been registered in real science journals, I'll tell you that as well. But my personal opinion is the Anunnaki are the Atlanteans. And so what I'm going to try to do tonight is establish for you some evidence that will prove that this culture was not only here, but they were also not only interplanetary civilization, but they were also an intergalactic civilization. Now, a lot of people always want to ask, where was Atlantis? Was it this ring city in the Atlantic Ocean? Was it in Greece? Was it in the Mediterranean? Where was it? And my answer is, Atlantis is everywhere. We are all standing and sitting on Atlantis at this exact moment. Atlantis was this entire planet. The ring city, in my opinion, was just one of many capitals on Earth. Okay? And that's what we're going to go over tonight. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the Enuma Elish, the 7 tablets of creation to start off. And what you need to understand is the Enuma Elish is an ancient cuneiform group of tablets that really talk about the creation of our solar system, the very beginnings of the whole thing, how we even got here. And this was copied over and over again onto actually stone tablets that go back, in my opinion, hundreds of thousands of years. Okay, hundreds of thousands, not 8,000, not 6,000, hundreds of thousands. These are recopies after recopies. Somebody sits there with a stylus and wedges in all these cuneiform texts into new stones over and over again to make sure that the next generations to come have a copy of this story. Now, a lot of people have heard about the Sumerian tablets, and they've also heard about Zecharia Sitchin. I think Zecharia Sitchin was one of the greatest researchers probably ever. And the reason why is because he did something a lot of people didn't do. He went and put his effort into trying to put the pieces of the puzzle together. What the thing that got misconstrued with him is people thought he was the only person that can decipher these tablets. That's false. As a matter of fact, Zecharia Sitchin didn't decipher or interpret any tablets. What he did was he took existing translations that already existed and put together his own stories. Unfortunately, later on in his life, he was vilified, and it was said that he was the only person that can read it, and nobody knew what these things actually said. But if you look at his books, he gives you his source almost at every paragraph. Okay, so the reason why I bring this up in the beginning is so that people who are sitting here with this precognition of Zecharia Sitchin, maybe this whole thing is just some made-up hoopla of some stone tablets, I'm here to tell you that this stuff was translated before he was even born. Okay, before he was born, E.A. Spicer, King, all these people translated this long before he was even on Earth. So these translations are ancient, in my opinion, because we're talking about 17 and 1800s. The tablets were already translated. So just wipe that misrepresentation out of your brain as I go through this. These are the actual tablets. These are the Enuma Elish and the 7 tablets of creation. What you'll find is that the Bible is mostly this text right here. dividing the waters from the Genesis is mostly here. Separating the waters from the waters, the creation of man in our image, all of that, really, and the creation of the earth, the solar system, it's all in these tablets right here. It's a real amazing story. Even the then proceeding of mankind is also in these texts as well. And the reason for the is there as well. Now, if you're wondering how can you be sure that these texts are accurate, because Billy's up here talking, we don't even know if he knows what these texts say. Anybody can go to the CDLI online cuneiform digital library. It's hosted by UCLA, and you can actually translate the stone tablets for yourself. You can take a tablet off the virtual shelf and drop it into an online translator and read it for yourself and come up with your own conclusion. What you'll find, just like I did, is that after many decades really of reading and studying and researching these tablets, all the different people that have researched them have a very similar story. Not the exact story, but the fundamental basis, the foundation of the story is always the same. People from somewhere else came to this planet, began to work on this planet and create a breakaway civilization, and then at some point, they engaged the existing hominid on this planet, genetically tinkered with us, and turned us into a worker for them for a period of time. Now we're just like an abandoned seed colony here, and we're just hanging out, and we're trying to find our way. But there's hope for us. There's hope yet. So the Enuma Elish is really, was originally Akkadian, okay? It's Akkadian cuneiform text. And these tablets, they were at the Library of Ashurbanipal is where they were discovered. The Atrahasis is also another amazing text. This is also another account written at another time, also telling the similar story of beings coming from another place and coming here to Earth and engaging mankind. Now, what's interesting about this and what really is important about this is to understand, in this time frame when these tablets were being copied and created, people didn't have time to become George Lucas. Right? They weren't inspired by George Lucas to create these incredible sci-fi movies on tablets. These people were scribing specifically what they were told to write by their God or their Lord or their master, or they were writing what they were experiencing themselves at that time. We also now know by doing a reverse calculation of the trajectory of this Sagittarius merger that this solar system that we're in, didn't come from the Milky Way. We are actually aliens here. We don't even belong in this galaxy. So do aliens exist? They're all sitting right here. We're the aliens. So the Sagittarius dwarf is another galaxy that's being consumed gravitationally and merging in with the Milky Way. And exactly at the point where it meets is where we are. Now, what's interesting about that, in the astrophysical books, you discover that in the early creation of this solar system, there were all kind of rogue planets and rogue suns flowing through here, wreaking havoc and creating disasters and everything else. Guess what the Enuma Elish says? The same exact thing. Again, ancient tablets, thousands of years old. Modern science tells you the same exact story. It's the same exact story. So we had a planet named Tiamat back then. Tiamat was this massive planet, 4 to 6 times larger than the Earth, a water-bearing planet with land, and in my opinion, most likely life. One of the biggest theories that I have when you talk about these miners that go into these deep shafts, and depending on how many layers down, you can tell how many millions of years back you're going in time. 3 million years, 4 million years, 500 million years, they found a vase. 200 million years, they found a hammer. They're finding all these tools and vases and all these incredible anomalies at hundreds of millions of years and back in time, depending on the depth of the anomaly, right, in the shaft. How can that be if human beings have only really been Homo sapien and creating tools for maybe 200,000 years, if you want to stretch it to maybe almost 1 million? Okay, you can do that. But where did these anomalies come from? In my opinion, so Tiamat in the ancient texts, it was actually colliding with another moonlet of another planet that was orbiting a brown dwarf star. When it collided with Tiamat, it blew into giant pieces. That is what your asteroid belt comes from. The asteroid belt, you have Mercury, Venus, Earth, and then you have Mars, and then you have another planet, which nobody talks about, called Ceres, C-E-R-E-S. There's another planet. It has more fresh water on it than Earth, by the way. Then after Ceres, you have the asteroid belt, okay? The asteroid belt is an exploded planet. It was Tiamat in ancient times. The ancients said this. Now, this is interesting because the Earth didn't exist yet at the time that Tiamat was here. They said that Tiamat was so beautiful that the glow from the sun reflecting on it rivaled the sun's glory. How could they know that? How could they know that if the Earth wasn't here? What perspective did they see this planet from? What planet did they look at it from? We don't know. But what's interesting is that was a statement that was made in the text. And so Tiamat exploded. A giant chunk of it swung away with all the water. This is where the waters divided from the waters. It recoalesced back into what we now have called Ki, which is the Earth. We are part of another planet. That's why when you dig into this planet, millions of years in the past, layers down, you discover anomalies that shouldn't be there. Because in my opinion, this is another Billy Carson hypothesis. Those anomalies were when we were part of another planet. Those are artifacts from Tiamat that we're uncovering. You never heard anybody talk about this before. That's my whole theory. I'm working on a show about this right now. So you see you have the way that our solar system is set up, and you have the asteroid belt right there between Mars and Jupiter. Right after Mars is a little tiny planet called Ceres. Like I said, it's hardly on any star maps or anything. But that right there, that what you're looking at with what they call the hammered bracelet in the Bible and other texts, the ancients have known about it for eons. That is actually remnants of Tiamat, an exploded planet. We have something similar right now. It's called the active denial system in the military. If you look at military active denial system, we have a device that sends out a beam. And so if somebody's coming to attack an area, rioters or whatever, they can send a beam at you that will make you stop, make you think you're on fire, make you vomit, make you sick, make you scream, make you have voices in your head. It's called the active denial system. We have the same exact technology now. We just rediscovered what he already had. And what's interesting is he said then he built the Great Pyramid. He claimed to have built, now he not with his own hands, okay? But he was the master architect for this structure on planet Earth. And then told once they rebuilt the land of Chem, which is Egypt before it was called Egypt, then he told his crew, he said to them, now go around the planet and duplicate what we did here. This is why when you look at this planet, no matter where you go, you're going to find similar structures, the similar construction techniques, the same type of tool markings. You're going to find the same types of pyramids, all the similarities, because why? You had one master architect. And this was the mission that Thoth was on. He was the master architect post-diluvial. He was the master architect that rebuilt life, rebuilt civilizations on this planet. And who was Thoth? He was an Atlantean priest king, okay? What's interesting about him that I love about him is that the fact that he didn't claim to have been an actual god. Where some of his relatives, they actually said, you know what? Yeah, I'm God. Yeah, bow to me. Bring me these sacrifices. You know what the sacrifices were for? Because they had to eat, man. They're not going to go kill no animals. Bring me the sacrifices. So people would kill the animals and bring it to them. That's how they ate. And so what Thoth did when they would drop to his feet, he would say, rise. I'm a son of Atlantis. That's what he would say. He said, I'm a son of Atlantis. Sometimes he would call himself the son of man, just like Yeshua did in the Bible, the son of man. Not the son of God, but the son of man. Interesting. Hermes was known to the Greeks as the master of all arts and sciences, perfect in all crafts, ruler of the three worlds, scribe of the gods, and keeper of the book of life. What's the book of life? What's the Akashic records? It's real. We now know in quantum physics and quantum mechanics that there is an actual book of life. It's called the Akashic records. So every thought that you think right now is actually leaving your brain. We know this for a fact because we can capture your thoughts and send them to a computer. We can even see the images in your head now. We can create images. We can tell you to think of an image, and we can actually capture what that image would be from your thoughts and put it on a computer screen. Just like that old movie, Minority Report. Yeah, it's real science now, all right? Look it up. Interesting. The book of life is real because every thought you've thought since you were actually born exists in space-time. Just like the radio waves from the I Love Lucy show from 1950, 1960, going out into space. If you can tune into that, you can watch the movie, no matter how far away you are in space. Same exact thing with your thoughts. Sometimes you think you get an original thought, you're just downloading and entangling with somebody else's information. He was the first intelligencer, was regarded by the ancient Egyptians as the embodiment of the universal mind, and it's impossible to extricate historical records from the man and the man's legendary accounts which attempt to identify him with the cosmic principle of thought. But he was a real person, in my opinion. I believe that he really did walk and he really did do what he done. All these Veracocha, all these different names primarily, a lot of these names are talking about the same person over different periods of time. Here I am standing in the King's Chamber of the Great Pyramid. And so now we're going to talk about a little bit more about circumstantial evidence and how it adds up to a case, okay? So here you see me standing next to the stone box that's inside of the Great King's Chamber of the Great Pyramid. Now this stone box, in my opinion, is not a sarcophagus because I'm 6'4" and I can't fit in this box without bending my knees. So if I can't fit in this box, why make a box this tiny? Is it the pharaoh was that small? I don't know. I'm not sure, but it doesn't make sense when all the other sarcophagus are massive and this one is smaller than me, okay? Interesting. And what's great about this is you can actually see a corner of this has been snapped off. And if you look across the room, if you actually get a chance to go with Egypt with me, which I'm going this October with 70 people, if you're in that trip, maybe the next one and next year, you'll see where this thing impacted the wall across the room. A huge energy spike happened right at the point of this box. Now, what's interesting about this box, it's the same exact dimensions as the Ark of the Covenant. Pretty interesting. My hypothesis, not any fact. If you look into the biblical tale of the Ark of the Covenant and you understand what kind of power it actually housed, and there have been attempts to reproduce the Ark, which were successful in modern science at a university. One scientist created, and it put up so much power, they had to shut it down. So actually, scientifically, it was sound. Underneath the Great Pyramid used to be aquifers of water, running water underneath the crystal granite, okay? Now, when you run water under magnetized crystal granite, you create something called physiostatic electricity, which then rises up into the pyramid structure. Some of that water was purposely flowed, in my opinion, into the Queen's Chamber to create a hydrogen extractor or electrolysis for hydrogen to separate hydrogen from the H2O, okay? That's for a communication device, what I'll talk about in a minute. The rest of it then would flow up into the Grand Gallery, which had these resonating chambers, which these resonating rods are now missing. You can see the slots going up into the King's Chamber. They're gone now. And then that energy would then be stepped up inside the King's Chamber and then pushed up through the apex and then sent out as wireless power around Egypt. An obelisk would then collect that energy, that ambient energy, and channel it. And if you had a JED with a cable on it, you can connect it to a light bulb, you can connect it to your electroplating machines, or whatever you needed electricity for, and you had wireless power.
The speed.
So how can the speed of light in meters per second equal the actual geographic location of the Grand Gallery leading into the King's Chamber? That's because we had meters in ancient times. Meters were not discovered more recently as we thought. They were only rediscovered, or the person that rediscovered them went and found some of this, proto-cuneiform. This is a proto-cuneiform metric system dating back prior to Mesopotamia. And this was found actually in Mesoamerica. So what in the world is proto-cuneiform metric system being discovered in the Americas when we know that Sumeria is supposed to be the cradle of civilization all the way in Mesopotamia coming out of Iraq? Pretty interesting. So the metric system is ancient. It's super ancient. So the people who try to debunk the fact that it's just a coincidence that the speed of light is the same geographic location as the Grand Gallery, you can debunk the debunkers with the fact that we already had the metric system, and it's actually well known. It's just that nobody has found it. But I found it years ago, and I talk about it a lot. So what is the power here? Let's talk about more circumstantial evidence that these beings came here with advanced knowledge. I looked into the mathematics in the Great Pyramid, and I found a lot of incredible correlations, okay? You can calculate a lot of things based on the structure itself. So what Thoth did, he took this pyramid and he said, I want for the future, I want this to be a time capsule of knowledge. And what I want to do is I want to take all this information, the information about all this stuff, and I want to compile it into the actual building structure itself so that in a future time, which is now, mankind can decipher it and realize how incredibly we were and that this came from advanced knowledge. The mean distance to the sun is half the length of the diagonal of the base times 10 to the 6th power. It will give you the average distance to the sun. You can calculate the distance to the sun from the Great Pyramid. The mean distance to the sun. You can also do it this way. The height of the pyramid times 10 to the 9th power represents the mean radius of the Earth and the orbit around the sun, or its astronomical unit. You can measure the AU. The AU is the distance from the Earth to the sun, and you can multiply that out, and depending on how many AUs you have, it'll tell you how far you are away from the sun and the solar system. The Earth's polar radius. The sacred cubit times 10 to the 7th power equals the polar radius of the Earth. That's the Earth's orbit. Polar radius is going pole to pole this way, not this way. Well, they can calculate it this way. It's all built into the Great Pyramid, okay? The Earth's polar radius. The pyramid embodies a scale of a ratio of 1 by 43,200. So the pyramid itself is a scale of the Earth's size. You scale the pyramid, you scale Earth down by 43,200, 432 hertz. That's the resonant frequency. That's the best resonant to listen to music. You scale it down. What do you get? To that radius, that ratio, you get the size of the Earth. So as you take the Great Pyramid at Giza and you take it and scale it up 43,200 times, you get the size of the planet Earth itself. And guess what, guys? It's a sphere.